Aloha and welcome to another episode of the Birds Report podcast. You're on A2D Radio. We've got a great show for you today. I have a very special guest, former Eagles great, one of the best cornerbacks who's ever played in this league, Eric Allen. He'll be with us shortly. Before that, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube to our show. And now we are going to go to Tom.
What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
Slap.
What the hell was that?
Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
And we're back. Sadly, the Philly season ended last night, but it's been a much better week for the Eagles. On Sunday night, they donned their throwback Kelly Green jerseys and went out and beat the Miami Dolphins, holding Tyreek Hill and company to no points in the second half. Then on Monday, Howie Roseman worked some of his trade deadline magic, acquiring two-time All-Pro safety Kevin Byard from the Tennessee Titans, which should provide a big boost to their thin secondary as they head into the murderer's row portion of their schedule and the playoffs after that. First, they'll head to Washington this week and try to complete a sweep of their season series against the Commanders for the fifth time in the last 7 years. Speaking of those Kelly Green jerseys, few players in Eagles history wore that color better than my guest today. Eric Allen was a key part of one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. You can talk all you want about the fearsome foursome and the purple people eaters and the killer bees and Tampa's nicknameless defense of the early 2000s. Fact of the matter is the Eagles defense of the late 80s and early 90s, which was affectionately known as Gang Green around Philadelphia, were every bit as good, maybe better than all of those units. Led by Eric and Reggie White and Jerome Brown and Seth Joyner and Clyde Simmons and Wes Hopkins and Andre Waters. Gang Green was the league's most feared defense of that era. A few years ago, the website Football Outsiders ranked the Eagles' 1991 team as the best defense of the last 30 years. That year, they became the first defense in history to finish first against the run, against the pass, and overall. They were a takeaway machine, finishing in the top 8 in takeaways every year from 1988 to 1994, which not coincidentally happened to coincide with the years Eric played for the Eagles. Eric spent 14 years in the NFL, 7 with the Eagles, 3 with the New Orleans Saints, and the final 4 with the Oakland Raiders, the now Las Vegas Raiders. That he still isn't yet in the Hall of Fame is an absolute injustice. I hope soon will be rectified. He's tied for 21st all time in interceptions with 54. He had 5 or more in a season, no less than 6 times. He's tied for 8th in interception returns for touchdowns with 8, including 4 in one season in 1993, which still is a league record. Eric played in 6 Pro Bowls, was a 2-time All-Pro, 6-time All-Conference. He was one of 4 corners named Pro Football Reference's All-90s team, along with Deion Sanders, Rod Woodson, and Aeneas Williams. He's the only one of those 4, sadly, who somehow still isn't in the Hall of Fame. He's made it 25 of the last 3 over each of the last 3 years. But still hasn't survived the cut to 15. Could this be the year that changes? We'll see. I certainly hope so. I'm hopeful it's going to happen, and I imagine so does Eric. Eric, thanks so much for joining me on the Birds Report podcast today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Paul, man. What a fantastic introduction. I really appreciate it, and kind of takes me back to those great times with Buddy and Reggie and Clyde, Seth. all those great memories we had. But really appreciate the great introduction.
You bet. You get some goosebumps on Sunday night watching that game and seeing those Kelly Green uniforms.
I tell you what, my phone was just buzzing off the hook. Of course, social media was all a buzz. The colors looked great. Not only the jerseys, but the socks, the logo in the middle of the football field. Just a really cool look for all those younger folks who hadn't experienced the Kelly Greens in their full display.
Yeah. Now I know you're doing some broadcasting work for the Raiders, so I guess that kind of prohibits you from getting back to Philly much for games, huh?
Yeah, it does. And unfortunately, during the season, you get these opportunities to come back, particularly for that game, representing the Eagles and the Kelly Green, all the alumni. So I had a bunch of friends back there. But unfortunately, during the regular season, it hasn't been an opportunity really since I retired. I retired in 2001, 2002. And right from there, I went to ESPN. But the playoffs are a different story. Last year, I was able to come back several times for NFC Championship game. And of course, went to the Super Bowl in Arizona. So I had a great opportunity to react with the fans at the NFC Championship game. I was in the parking lot with all the tailgaters. It was really cool and an awesome time.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the fan base for the Eagles is, as you well know, from when you played here, it's special. And now you're working for another one where the fans are pretty dedicated to the Raiders, no matter what city they happen to be playing in.
Yeah, you are right about that, Paul. Two of the great things is I started my career off, obviously, in Philadelphia, and those fans welcomed me in, and just to see how excited they are about the team in the grocery store, and always having positive things to say about us, and then ending my career with the Raiders and their fan base equally excited about, seeing their guys, being able to reach out and touch them in the community. So both fan bases were just awesome. And to this day, when you go to Texas, if you go east of Texas, everyone sees me and they immediately say, hey, 21 Eagles. And then in west of Texas, basically it's a Raider fan. So,
Yeah.
So two great fan bases, and they still, to this day, when they see you, and they go right back to those times when you played.
Yeah. You had mentioned earlier about, when you joined the Eagles, and you were a second round pick in '88 out of Arizona State. You come, Buddy Ryan's the coach. You've got all these veterans with swagger like Seth and Reggie and Jerome. What was it like for you as a young player back then when you came to this team?
Well, I'll go back a little bit. So when I was in college, we had a strength and conditioning coach by the name of Ronnie Jones, and Ronnie left, I believe, my sophomore or junior year, and went to the league and was the strength and conditioning coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. So periodically during that season, when I was in college, he reached out to some coaches on our coaching staff and mentioned like, hey, our head coach really likes EA. And so, word trickles down, and here I am, in college. And luckily that relationship between me and Ronnie, I was able to kind of understand like, wow, this guy, Buddy Ryan, the architect of the, Bears defense, really likes me and likes our plays and things like that. So it was just a reassuring that at that point in college that I would hopefully have an opportunity, to play in the league. And I had never thought about the National Football League. I really didn't. We had great players on our team. Dave Fulcher, who was like a 3-time All-American, he played for the Bengals, and we had a couple other guys in the league who I played for, but that was never like my main thought. I just wanted to win a Rose Bowl. I just wanted to, go to this school that I really wanted to go to since I was really young and play. So fast forward, we finished the year off. We're going through the draft process. And again, Ronnie Jones connects with the coaches. They're like, hey, man, Buddy Ryan really likes you. He's going to try and pick you up between you and this tight end from Oklahoma. And so that was, I think they had like the 13th pick, if I'm not mistaken, in the draft that year in '88. So as the process is going on, you're having all these interviews with these teams. And I interviewed with the Bears, the Falcons, I believe Seattle, the Raiders, a bunch of teams. And when we come to the draft process, Buddy had already had in mind, kind of where he wanted me to fit in this defense, things like that. So I get drafted, get the phone call, and it's just so kind of unbelievable that, a guy from Southeast San Diego is going to be playing on the same field as Reggie White. So Randall Cunningham and Keith Byers and Mike Quick and all those guys. So it was just a big present, and I just have to trust, that I was going to be able to measure up.
Well, you fit in very nicely as a rookie, starting right away, and you were kind of like the final piece of the puzzle for that defense.
Yeah.
You were not the typical NFL corner back then. You were what people like to call a student of the game now.
Yeah.
You talked to a lot of great corners back then. I remember you saying how you talked to Roynell and Herb Adderley and people like that about the position, about how to play it. You studied tape before it became fashionable. You kept notebooks with information on your opponents. I was talking to Rich Gannon, your former Raiders teammate, and he said Eric was one of the smartest players I've ever played with or against. You could talk to him during the week about Denver's offense or Kansas City's offense. Some defensive backs, particularly corners, it's I'm covering this guy. It's either man or zone. They all, that's all they know. He said, but not Eric. He understood formations. He understood personnel groupings. He understood splits. I mean, was that something you learned at an early age as far as playing that position?
Yeah, it was. And first of all, I have to give so much credit to Coach Shaw, Willie Shaw. He's the father of David Shaw, the legendary coach of Stanford. And he recruited me out of high school and was a huge, huge advocate for just understanding like the game and being someone who could not only physically play the position, but mentally play the position. And he always told me, he said, at some point, you're not going to be able to run a 4.3. You're not going to have a 38, 39-inch vertical. How are you going to survive when you get to that point? And I really didn't think about it at that time because, I'm 19, years old. So I always think I'm going to be able to run faster than everybody and jump higher and, be able to have, catch the ball and things like that. When I got to the league, that first training camp, when people who are still in college, you go to training camp and then you used to go back to school. Right? You used to go back to school to finish and do whatever.
Yeah.
Buddy told me, he said, hey, you're a professional football player now. You're going to start day one. And for you to start on day one, you're going to have to stay here. And so I took a risk. I called back to school, said, hey, I'm withdrawing from school. I'm going to stay back here and I'm going to just dedicate all my time to being the best player I can be if he's saying I'm going to start day one. So I was back there. And while I was back there, I was like under Roynell Young's wing. He would take me downtown Philly on Friday, we would eat lunch, and he would just talk about the game. At that point, he was in year 8. he had been in the Super Bowl his rookie year, played against Cliff Branch, and now 8 years later, he's at the end of his line, and he's explaining to me about how he gets prepared for games, how it's different from his rookie year. So I was able to take a lot of that and kind of build it into my game early. And another person was Mike Quick. Mike Quick was so great at just taking me and just teaching me early on. And I just got like a baptism that first, 7-8 weeks before training camp even started, about being a pro, how to, manage your week, ice tub, all that stuff. So I was operating on, a 7-8 year kind of veteran timeline when most other guys were still, rookies and basically on that path.
Yeah, Mike Quick is a terrific guy, as you well know.
Yeah. Great stories with Mike.
Eric, we're going to take a quick break for a commercial, but we'll be right back.
All right.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
And we're back with Eric Allen. Eric, you played for two of the best, maybe top 5 all-time defensive coaches in the history of the league, in Buddy and then Bud Carson after Buddy left. Very different people, at least in my mind. They were very different. I don't know, not necessarily scheme-wise, but personality-wise. I mean, what was it like playing for the two of them, and how different was it?
Yeah, Paul, that's a great point that you mentioned those two men who hopefully are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at some point. And you're right, they were so different. Personality-wise, Buddy was, he was out there and he was going to let you know exactly how he felt. And he was an extrovert kind of. And Bud was completely opposite. Bud would spend countless hours in the facility, after everyone was gone. So sometimes I would, check out pretty late. I would walk by and Bud would still be in there breaking down film. And and someone, because I think Bud was more of he loved defensive backfield, and kind of that's where he coached from. He coached from back end down, where Buddy, he loved those guys up front. Buddy loved his defensive ends, his defensive tackles, backers. So he coached from a defensive perspective from front to back. And that was one of the things I think Buddy wanted to strengthen when he got to Philly was the defensive backfield. He didn't believe that he had in Chicago the type of maybe corners that could have been there and made that defense even more dominant. So that's one of the things he wanted to make sure he was able to solidify with our Eagle defense. So yeah, two totally different guys, but awesome being in the room with them. So much experience, being able to adjust and change and feel confident about those changes as far as game time and in-game situations. And both of them were really helpful in trying to make sure, you set the standard and you become that standard as far as a defense in the National Football League.
Yeah. I covered the NFL for nearly 40 years for the Inquirer and the Daily News. And the memories of everything I covered in pro football kind of tend to run together a lot. People ask me, well, what's the greatest Super Bowl game you ever watched? And it's like, I'm not very good at that, especially as I've gotten older. But a memory that is still as vivid as the day I watched it, 1993, October, your 94-yard interception return against the Jets. Randall Cunningham goes down with a season-ending injury earlier in the game.
Yeah.
You guys are losing early in the fourth quarter, and you pick off Boomer Esiason and return it 94 yards. And then to cap everything off, Randall is on crutches, standing in the tunnel in the end zone. And as you score, you hand him the ball. It was like, that's one of those things you never forget. Steve Sabol called it the former NFL Films president called it the greatest interception return in NFL history. I'm sure it's still one of those things you remember like it's yesterday.
I do. And last week we had a lot of that, talking to media folks who were going to cover the game last week against the Eagles and Jets, and just a bunch of it, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And it was it's difficult because Randall got hurt again, right?
Yeah.
Remember in Green Bay years earlier, he got hurt. And we always had one of those teams that were just a opportunity, a breakaway, we thought, from getting ourselves to the NFC Championship game, which at that time, Paul, as you know, that was really the Super Bowl. Not the real Super Bowl, but the winner of the NFC Championship game was usually going to be the Super Bowl champ. And those kind of things we talk about when we were at the Pro Bowl also is like, I can't wait to, match up with the Cowboys in the championship game, or is it going to be, the San Francisco 49ers or whoever it is? You thought that NFC Championship game was really it. So going to the Jets game, RC gets hurt. He's our guy. We're falling behind. And I remember, when Boomer, he kind of threw it behind the receiver. So I had to make a little adjustment to just catch the ball. And so as I catch the ball, the rule for all DBs or defensive players is when you catch the interception, get to the nearest sideline, get as many yards as you can, and, get out. Because, they think defensive players can't, they're going to fumble the ball if they get tackled or something. So as I'm catching the ball, I wheel around and I'm looking upfield, and I'm not sure if I really see this, but I see like Boomer Esiason kind of walking towards his sideline. Like, oh, this guy's just going to, go down on the ground, or my teammates are going to tackle him. So I thought in my mind, like, oh, you think that's going to happen? So I kind of, turned into, I'm going to get as many yards as I can here. And once I kind of, do a couple moves and I see this crease, and if I hit that crease, I'm going to be good. And so that's kind of where the spin and then the couple back steps. And it seems like if I hit the turbos and make it through this gap, I'm going to be good. So once I make it through the gap, I cut back. There's a couple offensive linemen that I have to kind of avoid. And then as I'm running down our sideline, Ben Smith is coming, and, I'm thinking he's like, pitch the ball. I'm not going to do all this work and then pitch the ball. So I kind of widen a little bit, and then he's able to come and make a last block. And then as I'm entering the end zone after the high stepping, I see, Randall, and it was just fitting because, I can hand him the ball, and we're able to celebrate after that. And then everything kind of came back to normal. But in all those runs, Paul, for me, it all slowed down. It's like slow motion for me. As you're going through, the ball's in the air, it's slow. You're like, okay, I'm going to have to catch it this way. And as I'm running, things are kind of happening in slow motion. But when I got to the end zone, it all snaps back and it goes to reality, and I see Randall there and handing the ball. So it was just a great, opportunity, and I took it. And hopefully, for all Eagle fans, they remember me in that way.
Yeah. Clearly, in the early 90s, when it was becoming evident there was going to be free agency and the owners were going to lose in court, it was obvious that you guys were going to break up. Norman Brayman was a guy everybody wanted to get as far away from as possible. Reggie left, I think, after the 92 season.
Yeah.
Seth and Clyde and Andre headed for Arizona after the 93 season. You left after 94. An easy decision for you, or what was going through your mind when you think back?
No, not at all. I mean, first of all, not signing Reggie back was just a critical blow for our football team, for the fan base, and everyone defensively. We're tight on a team. We're truly brothers.
Yeah.
And I actually went to Green Bay in that off season to just kind of get it all in. Like, Reggie, where are you going? Like, why are you going up here? I had a friend, Sterling Sharp, who was a great receiver for the Green Bay Packers. But at the time, I just kind of like, what are you doing, Reggie? So I go up, spend some time with him up there, and he was, in a good space. Just think that he wasn't valued in Philadelphia. And I'm not sure if it was ever a point of if the Eagles at that time valued him. It was just, I don't think Norman Brayman was going to be in it for the long haul. So he was just kind of saving money. So when he sells, there's no really no overhead. So Reggie leaves, is crushing, and he calls us that next year, because I think we started the year off like 6-0 or something, if I can remember. And I remember him saying to me, "You guys better not go to the Super Bowl," And so things happen. Seth and Clyde leave, go to Arizona to join Buddy, and that next year coming up, it was just no way that I was going to come back and sign when all my brothers had left. I just didn't see a true path forward. I knew there was going to be tremendous change, and I just didn't. I just think it was time, for me to move on. It was. I love Philadelphia. I love where I stayed. I had great neighbors. My wife loved it there. We had great friends. We loved the fan base, everything about it. But as far as product on the football field and how I wanted to play football, I thought it was going to change, and I just thought it was best that I, take that opportunity.
Yeah, I'll skip past the 3 years with the Saints.
Yeah, please do.
They were not the most memorable of your career. Not because of anything you did. It just was a team going in the wrong direction at the wrong time.
Oh man, a disaster, man. I'll come back and we can talk about nightmares, and I'll definitely give you some stories about that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I'm working on a book, Eric, on Sam Mills, and he left he went out the door as you were coming in.
That's
and
right.
I talked to people in that organization from that time, and I mean, it was chaos. They had nobody that knew anything about how to handle the salary cap. They had all these these guys that had gotten old and didn't want to stay anymore, and they couldn't pay them. So it was just, I feel sorry for those 3 years that you had to deal with it. But you end up at the end of your career spending 4 years in with the Raiders with Gruden. You helped turn them around. I mean, they 2 8-8 seasons, but then everything changed. It had to be a nice finish. 6 interceptions in 2000 when you're 35 years old. It didn't happen,
Yeah. I tell you, it was the person who convinced me to go there, because I had told the Saints, I'm not coming back. So you guys need to trade me, So I was, I had been in so many, really unique situations, and sometimes, when you don't know better, you just kind of, I just walked in, I was like, I'm never coming back here. So trade me. And they're like, we're not trading you. We're like, yes, you're going to trade me. And you're going to trade me somewhere where, I want to go. So I'm telling the GM, these things. And I told them Jeff Fisher was with Tennessee. I had a great friend in Minnesota. And so they knew that. So Jeff calls me and he's like, hey, come down here. I was like, no, I'm not going down to Tennessee. I want to play in California. And I want to play for the 49ers because I want to play the Saints twice every year and just kick their butts, right? So so Jeff Fisher calls. I'm like, no, Jeff, thanks, but no. Great friend of mine, Randall McDaniel, who's, Hall of Famer. We went to school together in college. He calls me from Minnesota. I'm like, no, I'm not going there. The Chargers called, hey, come home. I'm like, no, I'm not going there. So I'm going, I'm just trying to figure out a way how I can get to the 49ers. So before I take my trip to San Francisco to talk to Dwight Clark, I think who was the GM at the time, Willie Shaw calls me, who recruited me out of Arizona State. Right. He was a coordinator for the Raiders. He says, hey, I hear that, things are not going well, and won't you take a trip out of here? And I was like, we were a terrible team. We beat you guys last year. I'm not going to Oakland. He's like, hey, listen, we have a new coach. Just come and take a trip. So I fly out to Oakland, and I get to the facility, and I'm talking to this young guy, and we're talking about Philly and stuff and how, Philly is cool and everything. So I go upstairs, talk to Mr. Davis. And when I was young, Paul, I had two teams. I had the Raiders because Marcus Allen, Cliff Branch, Fred Biletnikoff, those are my guys. Love them. And I love the Eagles because we had a guy who was a kick returner who went to UCLA. He was from San Diego, and he ended up playing in Philly. So he would come back in the off seasons, and our youth football team was green and white. So we associated with Philadelphia. So I'm talking to Mr. Davis, and I'm like, Mr. Davis, I'm just kind of getting to him all these. You guys had Mike Haynes. You guys had Lester Hayes. And so I'm just talking to him, being a fan guy. And so I leave, and he's like, hey, I want you to go talk to the head coach. I'm like, all right, great. So I walk in the head coach office, and the guy I had spoke with when I first got to the facility looked like he was like 22 years old. And I'm just talking to him about Philly. It ends up being Coach Gruden. So I'm like, he's like, so what are you going to do, E? And I'm like, oh, I really like it here. Coach, man, you're awesome. And I know what the defense is going to be about. And he's like, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get this young kid out of Michigan, and you're going to teach him up. I mean, it's going to be you and him. And then we'll figure out, the safety point of view. And so as I'm talking with him, I'm feeling it a little bit. What happens is I said, I have to go home and talk to my wife. So as in our conversations with Coach Gruden, we had talked a little bit about what went so wrong in New Orleans. And I was like, man, the only thing that was good is I had a great chance to meet a guy named Anthony Newman, who played at Oregon, and we played against each other, but he played a couple years with me in New Orleans. And that was the only great thing about it, really. So I fly home, I talk to my wife. My wife gets on the phone with Anthony's wife, and they're talking. And so they give me the phone. And this was maybe 5 or 6 hours later after I left Oakland. So I'm talking to Anthony. I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? He's like, nothing much. He's like, guess where I am? I was like, where are you? He said, I'm in Oakland. I was like, what are you doing in Oakland? I just left there. He said, they just flew me down. They're going to sign me. So that conversation I had with Coach Gruden about Anthony, he was willing to go out and sign a strong safety, betting that if I signed him, that I would come down. And he was right. So, I mean, it's just, it was a perfect scenario. I go there. We end up getting, Charles Woodson. We had Eric Turner for a while, who sadly, passed away years years ago when we were in Oakland, actually. And we just created just great chemistry. And I tried to bring all that Philadelphia defensive energy to the squad and just be confident, understanding your game plan, understanding your opponent. And when we brought Rich Gannon in, who's a, Delaware guy, we really hit the ground running.
Yeah, you sure did. We're going to take a quick commercial break, Eric. Be right back.
All right.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My Nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back with former Eagles cornerback Eric Allen. Eric, let's talk the Hall of Fame for a bit. You've made it to the final 25 each of the last 3 years, but I was curious. A lot of guys. Another cornerback who I covered, Asante Samuel, when he was playing for the Eagles. I mean, even back then he was thinking Hall of Fame. I mean, it obsessed. It was an obsession with him. I mean, he would find out each city he played in. He'd find out who the Hall of Fame voter was and befriend him. And I mean,
really,
yeah. I was curious with you. Did you think much about the Hall of Fame during your career? And I mean, what's been more frustrating here? The years when you weren't in the when you didn't make the final 25 and didn't even know where you stood. Or these last 3 years when you can at least feel that it's in striking distance.
Yeah, I never thought about it while I was playing. It was just trying to be the best guy on the field that day. So when you're playing against prime, you want to get a pick and make sure that you give Freddie Barnett or Calvin Williams a little tip or so to beat prime, So at the end of the day, when our peers, which is important, are looking at the game, they're like, oh, man, EA won that battle. He got a pick, his team won, and Calvin Barnett beat Deion or something. That's kind of what it was about me. When I'm in the field with Ronnie Lott, I want to be the better player at the end of the day. If it's Rob Woodson, whoever that guy was who was supposed to be on the other side, at the end of the day, our fan base knows that they had the better defensive back. And that's what was important to me from day one in September against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1988 till, the last one against Tom Brady in the tuck rule. I wanted to be the best guy on the field. Not who you think is, but when you watch the game, the guy who makes the plays, the guy who's, has an impact in the game. So that was what it was when I was playing. Now, when you get out, it's just a matter of there's nothing you can do. So until this year, I really never did any prep to find out like who is responsible for submitting me and how they submit me and how should I go about how I go about trying to figure out if there is anything that I can do, because you think the numbers, as soon as I retired, I wanted to make sure I had 50 or more interceptions because
Yeah.
there were some guys that I knew, particularly the great Larry. I tell you, to have 50 or more interceptions was the standard. That's what I thought the
Right.
standard was.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I laid my hat on after I was over.
Yeah. You know, I've lobbied for you for several years. I send letters out
Thank you.
to the other selectors every year to make a case. I've asked them, like, I've tried to get a sense of, there are a lot of people that feel you should be in the Hall of Fame, but clearly not enough, or you'd be in. So I've tried to find out why. And I know one of the reasons, and it's unfair. Football is an ultimate team sport,
right?
And yet, people are biased towards winning teams. I mean, win Super Bowl. You guys never won a Super Bowl, and so it doesn't make any sense to me because you couldn't. No matter how good you were, you couldn't control that. You can control what your offense did in Philadelphia. So that just it's kind of baffling. And yet you look at a team like Tampa Bay, the 2002 team that won the Super Bowl, beat the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. Their defense was nowhere near as good as the 80s and 90s Eagles defense, and yet they've got 4 people in the Hall of Fame. Your defenses have won, Reggie White. I'm hoping they're starting to see the folly in that whole theory. I also talked to Rich Canton.
One thing, do you think, as far as coaching wise, Buddy didn't rub everybody the right way? And so I think about those players, us players, outside of Reggie, because obviously Reggie is one of the greatest defensive players ever to play in the game. People had mentioned like, hey man, Buddy probably didn't make many friends, and I talked to Rob, all the time, because he's a coach with the Raiders. We don't know, and hopefully. Like you're saying, hopefully these things happen. But you're saying you talked to Rich?
Yes, I talked to Rich, and I said, "Well, what do you because Rich is one of your biggest supporters. I mean, I went to Rich because he played against you and for you with you. I talked to Troy Aikman, who I'll tell you what Troy said in a little bit. But I asked Rich. I said, do you have a theory why Eric isn't in the Hall of Fame yet? And he came up with an interesting one. He said part of the problem is when you look at his career, he played 14 years. If he had played, say, 10 in Philly and 4 in Oakland, I think he would be perceived differently and probably would have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. But when you play in several different places, sometimes it diminishes your value, or at least your perceived value. I get, I think more of it is that, Buddy would, if you asked Buddy, he'd tell you what he thought of somebody, and he obviously would praise you to no end. But Bud died Bud died in the early 2000s. Wasn't around to lobby for you. I think that hurt. So, I think it's just a matter of time now. But that's just. I hope that's not me being. I don't want to give you false hope. We'll see. Troy, so I talked to Troy, and because a couple of years back, Brian Dawkins got into the Hall of Fame in 2017, the same year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Year before was his first year of eligibility. He made the finals and didn't get in. He and John Lynch were both finalists, and then they kind of split the vote. And I was like, this is not fair. John Lynch couldn't hold his jock. John got into the Hall of Fame, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but he was not the player Brian Dawkins was.
Right.
And so a year later, one of the members of the selection committee, Jarrett Bell, I think it was, from USA Today, happened to be talking to Bill Belichick a couple weeks before our meeting before the Super Bowl. And he asked Belichick about Lynch and Doc, and Belichick laughed. I mean, come on, that's not a comparison. I mean, Doc is really the better player and should be in the Hall of Fame. Well, Jarrett shares that story during our meeting. Next thing you know, nobody's voting for Lynch and everybody's voting for Dawkins. And Doc goes into the Hall of Fame in his second year of eligibility and never looks back. I decided, I got to find, who best to say something about you that people would listen to. And Troy played against you from 89 through your last year with the Eagles, and then played against you when you were with the Saints, I believe, and at least once or twice when you were with the Raiders. So I went to him and he said, this is an easy one for me, having played against him. He said he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I always thought he was such a great player. He mentioned that he and Dion came into the league together. He said, I played against Dion when he was with Atlanta and San Francisco a few times. And then when he was one of my teammates, he said, obviously he was a shoo-in. But once you get past Dion, I thought the two best corners I ever played against were Aeneas and Aeneas Williams. He said, I just thought Eric was fantastic. I'm a fan of his. He was such a smart guy. There are a lot of talented guys who get out of position, but it was clear he knew the game and knew how to defense receivers and use leverage against them and all of that. He was a risk taker and had all of those interceptions and pick sixes, but I think he was a calculated and heady risk taker in the way he played. So, that seems to be convincing some people that, maybe there was any reservations they had about you that are going to change. We'll see. The problem is I don't know it's all secret ballot. We have discussions once we get to the final 15, and I feel once, if you can get from 25 to 15, we spend 7-8 hours in a room discussing those 15 people. And that's kind of when, we find out what people think of everybody. And it's, that's why I'm hopeful that this year you make it to the finals and, to take it from there.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I tell you the funny things about, I was watching film and there was this one play that Mike and Troy would run, and it was almost unstoppable. It was like Mike would run like 5 steps, turn his head, and the ball would be there. I'm like, how do you stop that? I mean, how do you? And so I started calling it a glance. It was a glance route. So I said, in every offseason, what I would do is I would get an offense and I would put myself as a receiver. So, one season we're about to play, I think it was 89, we're playing the 49ers. So I just kind of did everything that Jerry Rice would do, right? So fast forward, so I get to, and I'm thinking, the Cowboys have this route that's unstoppable. Where's the tail? Like, how do I know this thing is coming? So Mike would line up about a foot inside the numbers. And every time he did it, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, turn his head, ball would be there. I was like, okay, that's it. So I would line up, I check the alignment, and to snap the ball, I just jump inside. The first 2 times, Troy is like, well, what's going on here? No one ever breaks this pass up. So the next game, they come, he lines up, he looks at me, and then he adjusts his alignment. I was like, okay, I got, so we were playing a little cat and mouse, but it's just funny how things like that happen. Yeah.
Eric, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun talking to you and going back and talking about the 80s and 90s teams and talking about the Hall of Fame, which I hope you'll soon be in. So you take care of yourself. I hope to see you down the road. I hope to one day be congratulating you on making the Hall of Fame.
All right. Thanks, man. Really appreciate the conversation, and go Birds.
You bet. We're going to break for commercial. We'll be right back with my top 10 and bottom 5 power rankings.
Hats.com is the premier destination for quality and fashion-forward hats and more, with designs for every style and trend. Locally based and run by Philly sports team fanatics, Hats.com can help you elevate your hat John. Utilize the easy-to-use guides at Hats.com to find your perfect size and style, and shipping and returns are free. Hats.com. Find yourself in a hat. Use code Philly for 15% off your order. Hats.com.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My Nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
And we're back, and now it's time to finish our show with the last portion, our high-tech power rankings. So I'm going to move this computer over so you can get a glance at the board as we go through the bottom 5 and the top 10 this week. You can see I've already got the logos down for the bottom 5. We'll start with 28. We got a newcomer this week, Green Bay Packers. Packers are making their first appearance of the season in the bottom 5 after back-to-back road losses to the Raiders and Broncos. Jordan Love has just 4 TD passes and 7 interceptions in the Packers' last 4 games. Number 29, we've got Denver. It's going to take more than a 2-point home win over Green Bay to make me forget 70-20. So they're going to be in the bottom 5 for a while. Number 30, got Washington. Losers 14-7 to the Giants on Sunday. Eric Bieniemy's decision to leave Andy Reid and the Chiefs and try to make his mark in D.C. Has not been a great career move for him so far. Commanders are 20th in the league in scoring, and Sam Howell already has thrown 7 interceptions. We'll see what happens this week when they play the Eagles. Number 31, we've got the Cardinals. They lost for the 6th time in 7 games Sunday. Kyler Murray is practicing this week and might return this week against Baltimore, but does anybody really care? Number 32, the worst team in the NFL once again, and probably in perpetuity, is the Carolina Panthers, 0-6. They're coming off a bye, but at least they should be well rested when they play Houston this week. They've got a chance to win, but they put three of their key players on IR this week, so I'm not very hopeful that they're going to turn it around anytime soon. I feel sorry for Frank Reich. Going to the top 10 now. Number 10, we've got, for the first time, Cleveland Browns. 39-38 winners over in Indianapolis. No Deshaun Watson for most of the game, no problem. Former Temple star P.J. Walker led the Browns to their 2nd straight win and their first appearance in the Damo top 10. Number 9, we've got Pittsburgh. Same place they were last week. Nobody's paying much attention to the Steelers right now, but you probably should. They won their 2nd straight game, beating the Rams 24-17 a week after upsetting Baltimore. Number 8, Detroit Lions. Figures I moved them up to 2nd last week, and they go out and lay an egg in a 32-point loss to Baltimore. They should bounce back fine on Monday night this week against the bad, awful Raiders, but we're going to have to earn my respect again after that loss to the Ravens. Number 7, we have the Cowboys. Cowboys aren't playing great on either side of the ball. They're coming off a bye. They've got just 6 sacks in the last 4 games. And running back Tony Pollard is averaging just 3.9 yards per carry. So they've got to crank it up on both sides of the ball, or they're going to be eating the Eagles' dust real soon for much of the rest of the season. Number 6, we've got the team the Eagles beat last week, the Dolphins, 5-2. Dolphins were held scoreless in the second half Sunday night in their loss to the Eagles. Their 5 wins are over teams with a combined 8-25 record. So take that for what it's worth. Number 5. They've been in and out of the top 10. They're 5-2 now. The Ravens won their second in a row, beating Detroit handily, obliterating the Lions and putting up season highs in yards and points. Number 4, we've got the 49ers, down from 2. Probably should deserve a bigger drop than 2 spots, but they were a team that looked unbeatable a couple of weeks ago. And even with 2 losses in a row, they're still one of the best teams in the league. And I got a feeling that it's just a matter of time before they turn it around here. Number 3, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were 6 last week, moving up to 3. Their win over the Saints was their 4th W in a row. Trevor Lawrence has thrown just 1 interception in those 4 straight wins. Big game Sunday in Pittsburgh against the 4-2 Steelers should tell us a lot about both teams. Number 2, the Eagles. Had them 4th last week. They moved up. It was a good week for them. They not only beat the Dolphins to go 6-1, but they also acquired 2-time All-Pro safety Kevin Byard from the Titans, who will be a big asset to a defense that's thin on the back end. And last but not least, as you can suspect from elimination here, the same team that was number 1 last week, the Chiefs. 31-17 winners over the Chargers last week. They remain number 1. Taylor Swift's boyfriend has caught 31 passes from Patrick Mahomes in the last 3 games. So clearly women do not weaken legs, as Mick told Rocky back in the first Rocky movie. Okay, I'll move this back. There we go. Hang on just a second. Okay. That's our show for today. I'm really excited that you're able to join in when I talked to Eric Allen. We had a nice talk. You're going to love next week's show. In advance of the Eagles playing the Cowboys in their first meeting of this season, I'm going to have Merrill Reese, the voice of the Eagles, and Brad Sham, the longtime voice of the Dallas Cowboys, on together. They're longtime good friends. Also, 2 of the best radio broadcast, play-by-play broadcasters in the game. Why they're not in the Hall of Fame is a mystery to me. Besides Eric Allen, I've been lobbying for those 2 too, but my pleas so far have fallen on deaf ears. Anyway, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank my producer, Ralph Dell, for guiding me through another podcast episode. If you're interested, you can follow me on Twitter at pdamo. My email address is pdamo@aol.com. You also can read me on America's Best Pro Football website, the33rdteam.com, and at jacobsports.com. I also co-host NFL Monday Night Kickoff on WBCBsports.com with my good buddy Paul Jolovitz. Thanks for joining me today, and aloha.